This is Will Stewart, and this is my psychology and film project for Dr. Kayaz's PBSI 107503 class, and I'll be doing it over the main character in the famous TV show Breaking Bad. So the main character in Breaking Bad is Walter White, who is a high school chemistry teacher who is diagnosed with an untreatable stage 4 lung cancer in the beginning of the series. He does not let his family know at all about this at first and is instead thrown a surprise party for his 50th birthday right after the diagnosis. Obviously, he did not coordinate this, but he just walks into the door afterward to this happening. And while he is here, his brother-in-law, Hank, a DEA agent, puts on the news in the living room TV where they are covering one of his most recent drug busts. During the event, Hank basically tells Walt that he should come along with him to his next drug bust. He suggests it, but he kind of just demands. He's like, hey, put some hair on your chest. Stop living so uptight all the time, kind of just ribbing him about it. But Walt actually accepts later on, and while on the trip, he's in the car while they're inside the house busting whatever's going on, and Walt spots an old student of his escape from a house across the street, intriguing his interest. This student is later identified as Jesse, who he follows to Jesse's house later in the day and approaches him in his driveway, proposing a partnership together in the drug trade, cooking methamphetamine. From this point on, the two go through a lot together, climbing from basically doing their own thing through the ranks of the drug trade in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and they end up working for a local drug lord who is also a pillar in the community, Gus Fring. When they get here, though, everything's good. They just have to cook in a basement of some warehouse, and they are not having to face any danger themselves with like trading or anything. But this is the point where Walt basically tries to tear everything down in hopes of becoming the man, killing a lot of people and destroying everything. And so in this presentation, I will go over a psychological disorder that Walt exhibits throughout the show with two symptoms that he shows really well, with one he may not show as well as the others. That I am diagnosing Walter White with is narcissistic personality disorder. NPD is a disorder recognized in the DSM-5 and is characterized by a pervasive pattern of feeling superior, having desires for admiration, and lacking empathy. This is what Walt exhibits throughout the show, in my opinion, completely. This grows worse and worse as Walt grows in his power within the drug trade, eventually reaching kingpin status at the end of the series, where he is the worst version of himself. One aspect that Walt exhibits is his complete lack of empathy toward others. This also worsens completely as the show goes on. At the beginning of the series, he is a very caring person. He's an honest person of his community. He's a family man. However, once he enters the drug trade, all of this fades almost completely. Not completely, but pretty much close to it. The feelings and conditions of others escapes his mind if it does not help him advance his influence and power within the drug trade. Another aspect is his extreme sense of self-importance. He's constantly reminding people around him in the drug trade. He's constantly reminding his family members, basically his wife. I don't think he really talks to his son about this, but he's constantly reminding his wife about his importance, how hard he works, his accomplishments that he's made in the drug trade, how he's basically built everything around him, and how he is the man and he should be the one that is feared and not other ones fear, and not he's the one to be feared and how he doesn't fear others. One thing that he does not really exhibit is overestimation completely. This is one thing that is listed by the NCBI, National Center for Biotechnology Information, when they talk about NPD, is people with NPD have a lot of overestimation, which this is true. Walt does overestimate himself in certain aspects, and he's always putting himself on a pedestal. However, with overestimation, you have to underestimate others. This is something that he does not do, in my opinion. He does not underestimate his enemies. He does not underestimate his rivals. In fact, he might overestimate he might overestimate others because he's always trying to stay 2 steps ahead of others and trying to outsmart them. So with that being said, I don't think he underestimates his rivals. He does not seek therapy in the show at all with any of this. However, the cultural surroundings of Walt would definitely support him going to see a therapist, and the diagnosis would line up similarly to mine. It would probably be worse than mine because he would be diagnosed with like 4 disorders, like OCD and antisocial personality on top of NPD. I don't think this would be supported in every culture, however, just because some parts of the world don't consider mental health as much as others, specifically the West. And the NCBI does state this when talking about NPD. This is more of a thing in Western cultures than Eastern, and NPD was rediscovered in Eastern European psychology in the early 20th century. It wasn't rediscovered, but it was just resubmitted out into the world of science. And so, with that being said, the U.S. implemented this as a mental disorder in 1980. Since then, narcissists have been labeled as controlling, manipulative, self-centered individuals who have little to no empathy toward others, and this is also listed in the NCBI. So, with this being said, what does treatment look like? Narcissism is a very difficult thing to completely turn around in one's personality. Since this behavior tends to increase when he's working in the drug market, my first suggestion would be trying to get him out of it. And then if we can successfully completely remove him from the drug trade in Albuquerque, specifically get him across the country or something, then input him to psychotherapy. With this being said, we're trying to establish understanding and relation between him and the therapist, and accepting his responsibility for his actions in order to improve himself and move on from this previous thing. The problem with this, though, is that in the show, he does separate himself from the drug trade. He moves across the country to Maine after everything goes downhill, everything is busted. He has to change his identity. He has to move across the country into the woods of Maine, in the middle of nowhere, in a log cabin with no connection to anybody. However, when he goes to some diner, and while he's there, some people from back home in New Mexico that he helped build a multi-billion-dollar company with, he sold his stake in it before it really took off, but he helped build it. He helped do all the dirty work to help build it up, but when he thought nothing was happening of it, he sold his stake, and right after he did it, it took off and turned into a multi-billion-dollar company. They went on to something like 60 Minutes, and they were talking about how Walter White didn't help us really build the company. He only came up with a name for it. He has no, fingerprints on this company, and he's a powerless man who has nothing to do with us, and he has no credit with anything. He's just a, terrible person, whatever. And so this enrages him, and he's completely back to being the narcissist that he is, and he actually goes back to New Mexico and breaks into their house and threatens them, and scares them, and is like a reminder of, hey, I'm still this guy that you should fear, in a narcissistic way. But with this being said, I don't think the treatment would be that effective, but it's not for a lack of trying. The treatment would not have any ethical concerns, in my opinion. I don't think there would really be anything ethical to think about it, just because it's just therapy. There's no forced medications or anything. But the barriers that would potentially hold Walt from seeking therapeutic treatment, and this is from the NCBI again, it would include things like stigmas, lack of motivation, time constraints, and misfit of therapy. In my opinion, Walter White is a type of person, anything would hold him from doing it. He would not want to do it. He just wants to do things himself. He doesn't want anything to be done for himself. He would not do treatment. He would find any reason to not do it. And so with that being said, with broader perspectives, I would say that NPD is accurately depicted in this show and is widely discussed in such a way. Bryan Cranston did a very good job embodying his character and diving into deep, intense mannerisms of the disorder and throughout the show, and built a reputation as well as stigmas for his character, Walter White. I think that the display of psychological disorders in film can help others better understand how certain disorders may look in behaviors, rather than just having to go off of textbook definitions all the time. They can get a visual representation of how things look all across the board. And so with that being said, here's my citation page. Here's a picture of Walter White and Hank sharing a smile offset to show you that, film's not all that serious offset. And so here are my citations for everything I mentioned from the NCBI specifically. And thank you very much.